Mike's latest endeavor is the organization probably many of you have heard of, Astronomers Without Borders. They have the laudable and rather ambitious goal of trying to promote science and astronomy education worldwide and promoting even world peace through astronomical education with the slogan, one people, one sky. And I think I got that part right. I read it off the other screen there.
Yeah, you got that right. I stole that one, actually. I wrote an article for Sky Intel about the idea years ago, and Rick Feinberg put the subtitle, One People, One Sky, or maybe the title. So I stole it from him with his permission.
Well, it's a worthwhile acquisition. Anyway, without further ado, let me introduce my good friend Mike Simmons.
So, now I'm getting seasick watching that.
Sorry about that.
Okay. That'll do. I have a lot of slides. I like to show pictures a lot more than I like to talk. And so I've got a lot of pictures, and I just want to make sure we're somewhat on sync here. Okay. All right. So Claude, you'll be the one directing the slides on that side. Is that right?
I got it. I've got the keyboard.
Okay. So well, we might as well get off the title slide. Nothing there. So this is actually a picture that I took myself that I love to show because it's my only astronomy picture of the day. It's the only one I've submitted, but I don't usually do astrophotography. This happens to be a total solar eclipse over the Great Wall of China at the western end of it. And this is a fort, and somewhat relevant to how I want to start describing what we do in astronomy. And the next slide shows one of the things we do when we chase eclipses. So I'm a regular eclipse chaser. A lot of people are, and when I can, which is not as often as I'd like, I go to wherever there's a total solar eclipse. And what happens there is that we end up sharing what's going on with the local people. And in this case, this is a total solar eclipse in Africa. It took place in 2006. And look at the legs there, you might be able to figure out which one is the visitor. And he is sharing partial phases of the eclipse with the locals there, and this is something that's very common. The next slide also shows the same eclipse, handing out eclipse shades to everybody so they can see the partial phases. And you know, this doesn't seem like a big deal to us, but we have sent eclipse glasses to schools in Africa as well for a recent eclipse. And they have no other way to view, and they don't know about pinhole projectors and things like that. So it actually turns out to be a pretty neat thing. They've never actually looked at the sun before. The next slide is actually the same eclipse. I co-led this in Turkey, and a mother and daughter who were amongst the people there who were sort of catering our group where we were in Cappadocia. And the next slide also handed out some solar viewers to some students in Egypt. And these are all the same eclipse, actually.
Do you mind questions if anybody has...
Sure, yeah.
If anybody has any questions, feel free to jump in.
I won't be able to see you, but Claude will relay them, I'm sure. There you go. Now, next time, see what kind of animal you can make that one. Yeah, okay. And a friend of mine went to an eclipse in Antarctica, and the next slide shows him sharing the eclipse with the locals there, who seemed far more interested in him than they were in the eclipse, actually. And it was really an eclipse that started this whole crazy thing. And the next slide shows my small telescope that I took with me for the partial phases of an eclipse in 1999. This was the great European eclipse that went across most of Western Europe, but it kept going, went across, this is 1999, it went across Turkey, and then it crossed over into Iran, and that's where I went. This was not a place that I was familiar with beyond the news bites that we get. And so here I am with people viewing through my telescope. The next slide shows the eclipse itself. And we were on a high hill, a communications center up high looking down on this town. And it was a fantastic eclipse. But what's of interest is in the next slide, where I was suddenly found myself surrounded by students who wanted my autograph. And they didn't speak English. That's changed quite a bit because this is a country I go to quite a bit. But they gave me these books and pens, and I thought, well, I don't, if maybe they're asking for my apple pie recipe, but I just signed my name and signed, you know, something that seemed appropriate. And I found in this trip that Iran was very, very different than I thought. It was astronomy that took me there to find that out. The next slide actually just shows just how different it is than we expect. Disney's huge. And their Mickey Mouse is the wizard, or trying to be the wizard in Fantasia, is selling what's not Pepsi Cola, it's Parsi Cola. There were no US products there, but they had their own kind. Well, I want to go on to the next slide, which shows a little bit of 100 hours of astronomy, and maybe some of you took part in this. During the International Year of Astronomy, I led the Cornerstone project called 100 Hours of Astronomy, and that was the biggest event of the year. We had 4 days. The big thing for me was the Global Star Party, during which we had tens of thousands of amateur astronomers take their telescopes out to the sidewalks in most of the countries in the world and show the sky in one 24-hour night to hundreds of thousands of people. I believe as many as 1 million people. That's in one night, so this is a big star party. And the next slide shows some of the events that were registered, and of course the US was a big participant, but there are many countries on there that would be a big surprise to you. Iran is one of them. It turned out they have an extremely active amateur astronomy community, and in fact they are all very young. When I go to Iran, I'm usually the only person over 30 years old, and I wish, over 30 years old there, and it's overwhelmingly women. So that's very different than what we find here in the US, where it's mostly old guys like me who've been in it for a long time. There it's mostly young women. There were events all around the world, and the next slide shows one of, this was actually a telescope that I took to this location, which is Kurdistan in northern Iraq, very much in the news these days. I took this telescope, which was sold at a very low price, and an awful lot of stuff that was donated to the club there. And I'm going to take a pause for just 1 second. I'll tell you why.
Dinner time. Okay, now for the halftime show. Okay. Okay, the song is over. We'll get back to our speaker.
Commercials.
Okay, yes. Were you singing hold music there?
Yeah, we were doing a round.
Excellent. I hope I didn't interrupt too soon. Well, and speaking of interruptions, I just wanted to go shut the door because there is a 2-year-old out in the other part of the house running around, which is not something we're used to here. But things get really kind of loud sometimes, and it's very distracting. So we didn't need that for background. I meant to do that earlier, sorry. So this is northern Iraq taking part in that. The next slide shows some place, can you guess what country would have had 100 telescopes for 100 hours?
Japan.
China, of course.
Very cool.
And so this is one of their events. The next one is interesting because this is back in Iraq, but it's in Baghdad. Well, this is 2009, and at the time, a crowd of people in Baghdad was a target. And there were still 500 people that came out and said, we're going to do this anyway. And everything went smoothly. In the next slide, we see in Bangladesh, took our branding material, which they were supposed to translate, and made their own t-shirts. It was quite a big thing. Now notice that the idea here, and why I'm showing all these pictures, is you begin to get the idea that the same thing is going on everywhere. That in astronomy, we're all doing the same thing, we're sharing the same sky, and everybody took part. In the next slide, I can never remember where this was taken, but the teacher, obviously in a Muslim country, has stars on her coat there. The next one is Nepal, Kathmandu. The next is in India. The next one is in Iran. And then, well, Sherry and Reedy took center stage in the next one, which is in Brazil. Everybody wanted to share the views there. The next one looks very much like the one in Iraqi Kurdistan, except that this one is in either Bolivia or Peru, I forget which, the Indians there. And the next one is...
That's me, yeah.
Yeah, so this is in a developed, advanced country. This happens to be in Munich, Germany. And I'd love to show this to the guys at the ESO headquarters there.
Leave it to the Germans.
So there were a lot of different ways that people took part. The next one is the way they decided to do this in India. You know, and actually they do have other transportation there, but they had a camel, and they thought, what are we going to do with this camel? And so they made a camel cart display, attracted all the children. And the next one just kind of wraps it all up. You know, this is why we do sidewalk astronomy. This is why we do outreach and want to share what we do. This is really something unique in all the sciences, that so many people around the world want to share their passion for this science, which is more than just a science. I mean, it's the rest of the universe. This is where we live. And this is, of course, an H-alpha telescope. And this young man happens to be in Romania, but it could have been anywhere. This is sort of the payoff for doing the outreach that we do. Well, the next series of pictures here shows us in a different way. Now, this could be just about any place. You could look at the stars and figure out maybe about what latitude it is and what time of night and so on. It happens to be in the deserts of Iran, but it could be out in the Mojave, where there are some sand dunes in some places, or in Death Valley. And in fact, the next one is one that many of you will recognize because it is in California. It's in Yosemite. The next one is on top of a mountain. It's in the US, but it happens to be Hawaii, of course. A couple of things there that give that away. I love this shot because the galaxy is just almost perfectly parallel to the horizon, which you have to be in a certain latitude to be able to make that happen. But the Milky Way is something everyone sees. Now, the next one shows it as they see it in the southern hemisphere, with both the Magellanic Clouds there and the Moai on Easter Island, where this happened to have been taken. Next one shows the Milky Way in a very similar way, with the Magellanic Clouds, but in this case, it's at Iguazu Falls, on the border between Brazil, Argentina, and Uruguay or Paraguay. I always get them mixed up. Uruguay, really. So we all share this, even though those of us in the north don't get to see it quite like this. Well, the next one shows an object that we see at the same time all around the world. Over the Taj Mahal in Agra, India, of course, but the moon, at the same time, there were people perhaps in Asia, perhaps even in other continents, taking a look at the moon. Next one shows the moon rising over the Parthenon in Athens. Next is a series of moonrise over a building in Yazd in central Iran. And the next one is a shot taken by Dennis Chichico quite a long time ago, moonrise over the skyline of Boston. And the next one, of course, is taken in France, where it wasn't quite right. They're very picky, so he was moving it over a little bit to get a little bit better view. So all of these from different places around the world, of course. Now, what do we do in Astronomers Without Borders? Well, in addition, that's okay, that one's good, Claude. In addition to the idea of encouraging people to take a look at the sky, what we really do is bring together people who do this. Our mission is to connect people through our interest in and passion for astronomy. And it just so happens that most astronomy enthusiasts are involved in very actively sharing that with others. And so this is one of the ways we do this. Now our website is undergoing a transformation. There will be many more good tools like this in the very near future, but this, for example, is a blog. Anybody that joins, and membership, by the way, is always free for those who want to. It is paid for those who choose to. We can always use the support, and we try to give them some little perks as well. But almost all are free members, because if somebody had to pay, most of the world wouldn't be able to afford it. They would, or if they could afford it, they wouldn't have a way of joining. They don't have credit cards. They can't do it online, etc., etc. So this happens to be an amateur club in Morocco, in North Africa, where they go into schools, and this is showing an astronomy club, well, I guess a school astronomy club actually being supported by amateur astronomers. Next slide shows a little bit more of the students there. And as you can see, and most people expect Muslim countries to be very conservative and all of that, but you can see, especially in the middle picture, what is by far more common is some wear hijab, you know, the scarf, and some don't. It's a cultural thing, and the families choose what they want their children to do and what they do themselves. So these are things that we learn when we connect with each other. It goes a little bit beyond CNN. Another thing that's very popular that we do together, this is going back a little over a year, but it's in the next slide, by the way. Thank you. And so we do a lot of remote observing. Now this is supported by organizations or companies or individuals that have telescopes which are connected to the internet. Some are remotely operated, some are operated right then and there. In this case, on the left, a very common participant in our programs with a great observatory has in Italy, the virtual telescope. Dr. Gianluca Mossi is a professional astronomer, but he just loves to educate, and he's fantastic. And on the right, in this case it was Global Rentoscope, which is changed to another organization, but we also have a partnership with Las Cumbres Observatory Global Telescope Network, which did the last one of these, where we showed the north sky for the people in the south and the south sky for the people in the north. And this is all in real time. And for example, with Gianluca on the left there, this picture he would have taken, he would show what he's doing. He'd show the process and what's on his desktop, and then show the results. And if he does any processing, you'll see that too. It's really pretty much like being in the dome with him, with maybe 10 or 20,000 close personal friends. Very big dome. He did a program for Comet Sighting Springs, close approach to Mars. He had 600,000 people. So it is a very popular thing. The next slide shows something else that we encourage and we have programs for, and we'll be doing a lot more coming up this coming year because of new capabilities we're going to have on the website. So this is a Google Hangout, but what we have is people from around the world, and this was, I believe this is one about Global Astronomy Month, which I'll explain in a few minutes. So I see from left, I think he is in, I think it was Vietnam and Philippines. Maybe I got those mixed up. Our coordinator, and Morocco, Brazil. Let's see, far right is Sri Lanka, and next to him is Ghana. And so countries participating all over. And the slide that happens to be up there right now is an event online done between Vietnam and the Philippines. Live event where they essentially did the same sort of thing we did doing the Global Star Party, observing together. So they're looking at the same things and sharing with each other what they're doing. Now, oh, that was scary.
Sorry.
Who was that?
That was me, I was picking up a laser pointer in case any.
Yeah, I figured. Oh yeah, if you could hand it over, I could use that.
There you go.
It's a very powerful one. So now the next slide, this looks like a rather ordinary picture of somebody observing through binoculars with the usual risk of fracturing a vertebrae there without the benefit of a star diagonal, you know, getting down under there. And the guy's helping to steady her head. But there's a difference here, and the next picture shows what that difference is. This observer is blind. Now, not 100% totally blind, but she walks with a cane. She's not going to be driving around. A lot of people are legally blind, not able to see much of anything at all. They may see that there is a person in front of them, but not be able to recognize it. But with the proper high contrast objects in the telescope, they can see them. So, real world, the contrast is not so great, so they see fuzzy people. So this is one way in which we can break what is really another border, and there are people doing, now there are other things going on around the world that I'll describe. This one's really unique, and this is in Southern California. I haven't come across anybody else who is doing that, but we hope to get this out to more people. Just all you need to know is what's required and how to do it for them. And the next one there, Claude, that we had a preview of, this is a planetarium dome for the blind. This is a planetarium program. The dome has these blips on it representing the stars, the lines, the constellations, and the dashed lines, the way that you move from one to another. And this is a program that actually is developed in University of Valencia in Spain. But we did help with distribution some, and in fact with getting the English version created, and we continue to work with them for ways in which we can help.
Is that possibly available for people who might have access to a 3D printer to make their own version?
That's a very interesting thing, and the expense of this, the primary expense is producing and shipping these domes, which are not all that big, but you know, there is some cost involved. Now, this is a hollow hemisphere. Whether or not they have plans for it that could be done with 3D printing, I don't know. I don't know what the process is. That's a very good question, because that is certainly an option for getting them more widely distributed. As it is now, they have to get the cost of producing this covered.
Well, there's not a lot of us out there yet that have 3D printers, and in the next few years they're going to become ubiquitous. So.
Absolutely, yeah. And it may be less expensive to get the plans for it and have a company that has a 3D printer just print it for them. So that's an excellent idea. Now the thing is, if you have 30 people you're giving this planetarium program to, which of course does not require a planetarium, just requires something where they can hear the narration, then you need 30 of these. But that may be a good way to do it, yeah. Let's talk about that after, because that's a really good idea. So the next gets into some different things. Okay, now the genesis of this, first to begin with, a writer who was helping us with content on our website and newsletters and so on, said, you know, I've been writing poetry related to the sky all my life, and he had just self-published a book of his own poetry. And he said, I'd like to start an astropoetry blog. And I said, well, it's not going to cost us anything, so go right ahead. It turned out to be extremely popular. There are a lot of people doing astropoetry around the world. In fact, the astropoetry hotbed of the world is Romania. I don't know why that is, but it is. So this was a case of the sky inspiring people in a different way and expressing things in a different way. Now, the other part of this, and this is a little bit of an outdated slide, all of these represent things that have been done. But the Astropoetry blog and Astro Artist up there on the left is really the Astro Arts program. This was started by an artist, an Italian artist, who is living in the Netherlands. And she was doing sort of performance art with some radio, well, they're not radio astronomers, they are amateur radio engineers, I guess. And they have a large dish that was decommissioned that they were able to take over and refurbish. When I say large, I think it's 30 feet or something like that. It's not a little one. And that is involved in a program called Moonbounce. Moonbounce has been going on since the 50s when they first sent signals to the moon by radio waves, and then collected them back up, the reflections, with a large radio dish. People had sent messages in various ways, but they developed a way to send pictures. And I don't think I've got any of those pictures in here. But anyway, this is done in real time as a part of her program, where she usually bounces pictures created by students and talks about what it means to them. And then, of course, artwork we're all familiar with, and there's lots of stuff about even Van Gogh's Starry Night and various others. The night sky inspires all of us in different ways. And there are films and music. Yes, the Astro Music. Every year during Global Astronomy Month, this composer in Italy writes a new piece of music to which he puts a background of images like what you're seeing there in time-lapse videos, and performs it live as part of Global Astronomy Month, a cosmic concert, and that's very popular. And then finally, on the lower right, Astro Art Resources, well, that's become Astro Crafts, and there's somebody who does lots of interesting things related to astronomy, and you know, it's not my thing, but there are an awful lot of people who love to put things together, and all of it is inspired by astronomy. It is all astronomy related, and it shows how astronomy really is part of all of our cultures and all of our lives, all the time. So I mentioned Global Astronomy Month several times, so let's go on to the next slide. Now this one is older, but it still gives the idea. Global Astronomy Month is a follow-up every April to that 100 Hours of Astronomy project during the International Year of Astronomy. But instead of having just 4 days, we have a whole month. That way we can have all kinds of different projects. If somebody is clouded out on a certain night, so they aren't able to participate, they can do it on another night. Things that we don't think of here ordinarily, you know, we do outreach on Saturday night. Well, in Muslim countries, Saturday is a weekday. So Friday is the Sabbath, Thursday night would be the equivalent night. So there are all sorts of reasons why we do this, and we have a lot of different things. You can see the Global Star Party Saturn Watch when Saturn was in the sky in April a few years ago. It's a little bit gone now. Sunday, when we focus on the sun, we're going to have a whole month of lunar activities this time. There are a couple of light pollution awareness programs listed there, online programs. In fact, we have dozens of different programs. And these programs can be all different kinds. But we actually had to cut back. After a couple of years, it got so big, we could not properly handle all of the programs that we had. So in the next slide, we see we have different kinds of programs that we do. Obviously, we have the ones that we do ourselves, and we run it. But what I really prefer is taking programs that others have and sticking other programs together and making something new. And so we do have ones where somebody will have a program that they want to expand from national to international or provide more awareness, but the favorite of mine is the ones that are organized and run together as a collaboration, sometimes with more than one organization. And that way we can do things that nobody can do by themselves. And it's using the same resources. So this is kind of the lazy man's way of doing it. You know, get together and put together something new, and there you are. The next slide is, well, yeah, no, it's bullet points. Not so interesting. Let's move on. Telescopes to Tanzania. This is an example of a program that was developed by somebody else, but it was actually brought into Astronomers Without Borders. In this case, it started under a local astronomy club, but it quickly outgrew its creators' expectations, and they wanted to keep going. They're terrific at doing this. So Telescopes to Tanzania is a little unusual for us in that it is not accessible to everybody around the world, which is sort of a requirement. But we relaxed a little bit in this case because we do get a lot of people who take part by supporting this program, so that's one way to do it. Now, this is a typical classroom in most of Tanzania, which is a poor country by our standards, but is not alone in that regard. There are many, many like that. That poster up on the blackboard, I can pretty much guarantee that came from the people from the West who visited there, because they don't have any posters. There is nothing on the walls. And I'm not talking about Tanzania. I'm talking about everywhere. Everywhere other than North America and Western Europe, that's what you're going to see. In this case, they do have an actual floor instead of dirt, so it's not too rural. So let's go to the next picture. We can show a little bit of what they do. They started by bringing, this was a mission really to provide aid, but the guy there on the left, Chuck Wrigley, he's an amateur astronomer. He took along a Galileo scope. Well, of course, nobody had ever seen through a telescope before. And the next slide, he's actually showing a few things about astronomy. He's got a little bit bigger telescope there, and taken a little bit farther, teaching about astronomy. And the next one shows Chuck once again with a group of very interested students. Now, so what they have actually done is to expand this to the point that we have collaborated with Galileo Teacher Training Program, another legacy program of the International Year of Astronomy, which has trained tens of thousands of teachers around the world to teach astronomy. Why astronomy? Well, you can see those classrooms don't have any labs. They don't have any chance of getting any labs. In fact, the teachers don't have any training in science. They really don't know anything. Well, if you want a lab for some sort of a science class, if you're in Tanzania, wait until dark and look up, and you've got a world-class lab there. And all it takes is a few little tools, like a small telescope. Another thing is that astronomy interests everybody, and even the teachers are fascinated by it. This is not a dry academic field. You know, if you do outreach, that people love this. So this it's a very good way there. And finally, astronomy is what I call a gateway subject to all of the STEM fields: science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. It is all in astronomy, and including biology and biochemistry and various other things as well. So what they are doing there has been training the teachers not only to teach astronomy, to teach science in general, and how to teach, because the process there, like in most countries, especially if it's a former British Empire, the 19th century British system of you sit, you listen, teacher talks, you don't speak, the teacher doesn't speak to you, and that's it. This is not an effective way of teaching. What they are teaching is hands-on and getting excited about it. And this could change.
I know in the previous slide there was the small Dobsonian telescope that your group is marketing. You don't happen to market that shirt he's wearing, do you?
No, that is the most common question I ever get when I show this slide. And you know, I think I know somebody else, a good friend who does The World at Night, and he was highlighted, I think, on National Geographic or something. We started getting questions about where to get the shirt that he wears. It's done. Okay, so no, I have no idea. So anyway, and I will mention the little Dob, of course. Now, the next slide shows the path of that total solar eclipse. And my goodness, my slides are all mixed up here. I'm looking ahead. Okay, so I'm going to make you jump around a little bit. The total solar eclipse, and that is the path of the eclipse there. And there were a lot of schools, a lot of people in the path of totality. But everybody in Africa was going to see that eclipse as a partial phase. So we ran a program in conjunction with the IAU's Office of Astronomy for Development, and if you can, let's see, let me give you a cool one to click ahead 4 slides real quick. And there we see a program that we had for Eclipse glasses donation. So we have these glasses, which are branded Astronomers Without Borders, that we sold to great effect in 2012 for the Venus transit and the annular solar eclipse as a fundraising effort. But in this case, we marked them down to the lowest price. We had people buy them to send over to Africa. And we worked with the network of people around Africa, the Office of Astronomy for Development connected us with. And we had thousands of glasses purchased, and we sent them over with, shipping is a big problem in a lot of ways, but we sent them over with eclipse chasers, groups that were going out over there, and various methods, and every one of them got on the face of a child or several children who shared them in countries across Africa. Now, if you go back 1 slide, you will see there some of them being used in Africa, in fact, at the same school. It's sort of a uniform there, so they it's the same school with the green and white as we saw in the previous pictures. Now go back 1 more slide, and this is a familiar sight to many people, something that warms the heart of us amateur astronomers, and it is not such a welcoming thing to the wives of the amateur astronomers who have these old telescopes in their garages. But this is a 12-inch cave Astrola Cassegrain, classic Cassegrain. And some of you, if you're old enough like me, will remember this. This telescope was donated and is being refurbished to go over to Tanzania. We just had a crowdfunding program in which we raised almost $40,000 to create a Center for Science and an observatory. The Center for Science is not just a place, it is actually a center with an office from which people go out into the different schools around the country and teach the teachers how to teach astronomy, stay there and do astronomy with them, and so on. So most of the money is covering salaries. It's also going to build this building, which is in the north of the country, that will be used in conjunction with safari companies, so that will generate some revenue for it to keep it going. And so that was a very successful thing there. Well, so if you go 2 slides ahead here, 1 more. That's it. The little dot. Well, the one that was in the pictures in Tanzania is was a prototype. This is a telescope which has been branded Astronomers Without Borders. It is a 5-inch collapsible Dobsonian. It's good quality, 130 millimeter f5. It collapses down half that size. The tube is in a dovetail plate. So it slides down into the mount, and the whole thing stands a little over a foot tall and weighs 14 pounds. And it comes with a built-in handle because you can just pick it up and carry it away. Now, this telescope has actually been reviewed in Sky and Telescope extremely well, and highly recommended. Oh, and I should mention that in addition to this telescope, collapsible, the red dot finder there, 2 fossils which are not the usual junk fossils. We had them put better ones in them, and it sells for $199. And the reason we can do that is Celestron sources this for us. They invest the money, bring it over, do everything right up to drop shipping it. We only put out the money after one has sold and we've collected the money. So Celestron supports us by doing this. This is made by Cinta. It is sold in other countries under the Skywatcher brand. It's not sold by Skywatcher USA. They do the support for us. Therefore, so it's $250 to $300 in other countries, $200 here. So it's really the best bang for the buck you can get anywhere. And we still get almost half of the proceeds because they do it entirely at their cost, not including labor and everything else, just actual out-of-pocket cost. Oh, and the $199 includes shipping in the US. So, and it can only be purchased in the US, but presumably that's where all of you live. So it's turned out to be a fantastic, highly recommended beginner scope. The next slide shows one of the kids in Tanzania checking it out. But it is being used by schools for kids. Really, it's a tabletop Dodsonian, so you need something to put it on. But it is extremely easy to use because of its size. But it's also a great grab-and-go scope and a travel scope. The first person to pre-order one was Sue French and her husband Alan of Sky and Tel. So Kelly B has one that he took to Kenya with him for the eclipse and so on. So, highly recommended. Also an astronomy magazine, star product, and so on.
Does anybody make or provide a solar filter that can be retrofitted to that?
There isn't anything that's made specifically for it, and it would be a little bit weird because if you look at the front ring of the tube, you know, it's all molded in one piece, so it's a little bit odd shape, so you can't use something that just fits right over it. Now, one person who has one of these asked if we could get him a spare cap, because there is a cap that you don't see here that goes over it, so when it's collapsed down, the cap goes over and it's sealed, roughly sealed. So he's going to just cut out the middle of the cap and put some solar film on there. And you know, if you have a sheet of butter film, you can make it in many different ways. But no, there isn't something ready-made. Yeah, so it would be, I think that needs a custom thing there for that one. Well, we have a couple other fundraising things that I'll tell you about as well, in case you're interested, because these are very inexpensive. Anyway, the next one is the Moon Gazer's Wheel by Bob Krellin. And it's educational, and we hope to use this during our Global Astronomy Month lunar programs. This costs $6. What it is that when you are outside looking at the moon, not you guys, but maybe somebody that you're with that doesn't understand how it goes through phases, you rotate that the inner wheel with the notch in it until the moon that you see in the notch matches what you see in the sky, and then you can see where the sun is, where Earth is with you on it, and where the moon is, and you can see why it comes up and goes down at certain times and so on. So it's a nice little teaching tool. And the next one, if you do any work with, well, you know, any outreach at all, this is something that the Solar Dynamics Observatory, SDO, created, and they distribute for free with NASA funds. But the NASA funds have dried up. They're not funding any outreach programs outside of NASA itself now. So we're distributing them. And for now, the packs of 45 of them designed for classrooms are free, $10 a piece for shipping. We'll start manufacturing those once these are gone and distribute them. So there'll be a little charge, but we'll keep that going. So I want to go on to the next one, Global Pairing Program. In cases of interest, we match clubs in the US and Canada up with clubs in other countries. And you know, the idea is to get to know each other. It's sort of like the old pen pals idea, but we hope that eventually that the clubs in North America will tutor the clubs that have less resources and maybe a lot less experience in the other countries. And again, the Las Cumbres Observatory Global Telescope Network, if and when there are people who want to show how three-color photography works, how photometry is done, those telescopes will be available for mutual session as demonstrations, not because the people in the other countries will be doing that, but because then they will understand it and can understand the science results that they get that they're explaining to the public. So next, this sort of just gives the idea of the international clubs and North American clubs, and you know, everything that is done will be on our website. Now, what's in it for the U.S. clubs? Well, take a look at the next slide, and you can see that outreach can be a very big thing. This is an outreach event.
Did I get off on the wrong slide here?
You're in the right place.
Okay.
It has lots and lots of people.
Yes.
That is, in fact, an outreach event,
Wow.
not a rock concert. So they had 20,000 people or more there for total solar eclipse. This is in India, of course. So this is a very organized thing. The next one here also shows a camp the next year, the annular solar eclipse going through India with 8-inch refractors, and in addition other telescopes for projection. Now this is not typical, but one of the things that you may notice in some of these pictures is the astronomers, amateur astronomers, are all young. So they do outreach in a lot of ways that we don't do. They make telescopes like we used to do, and they really do a lot more outreach than we do. It is the main thing and has been for decades. But they are also very young people, and that is something that all of us in the United States are saying, where are the young people going to come from in astronomy to take over? Well, you know what, instead of looking around here trying to find the answer, just ask some other country, because that's what's normal. So if you want to know what interests them, they're the people to find out. The next slide is again an outreach event in India, maybe the same one, I don't know. And the next slide shows some of the clubs. Now this is a little bit old, there have been some changes since then, but it gives the idea. There have been 5 clubs, and let's see, put in 2 recent additions, and I think there might have been some more. So these are clubs in the US that are paired up with clubs in India, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, Malta, and did I miss one? No, I guess not. And the one very active club in Astronomers Borders in Austria that's talking with a club in Tunisia, where I've been to Tunisia a couple times. There are probably more of them speaking, well, a lot of them speak German, so that might work, and many speak English. Now, the next slide, these are some of the places as of the time this was made. There are more now. So there are clubs in Uganda, Bangladesh, Jamaica, India, Zimbabwe, Namibia, that just got paired up with somebody, Algeria, another country that I've been to, Indonesia, Nepal, China, Philippines, Morocco, and Brazil, and Vietnam. So these are some interesting places, and for those of us who are interested in other countries, it's a little bit like traveling to these places without really having to go someplace to get to know the people there. Now, next, well, this is another example of a community project that we did in conjunction with Cyclops, the Cassini Imaging Lab in Boulder, Colorado. This was an occasion of the picture that was going to be taken from Cassini while it was behind Cassini as seen from the sun, so that it could look back towards the sun without burning its camera out. This is a picture here that was taken several years ago. I've forgotten the year now. Not too long, 2006, something like that. And you can see on the left side, and I don't have the pointer in my hand, you saw it, there it is. That little dot there, that is Earth. So this was one that was not really pre-planned to take a picture of Earth, but they got this. And when they were looking ahead, Carolyn Porco, who runs the imaging lab, was looking ahead and called me and said, you know, we want to do outreach with this, can you guys help? Get it around the world, which we did. So the next slide shows what was planned, and this is probably familiar to most of you. You've probably seen the final pictures. Earth would be down in the lower right, and just in case you didn't know what it was, I guess Saturn is labeled for you too. And so that's what was being expected. The next slide shows Carolyn, some of her staff in Boulder, with a simulated picture there, what was expected, because this was not been taken yet. And so what we did was again have participation. In this case, it was a, she called it Smile at Saturn or something, because everybody on the side of Earth facing Saturn was having their picture taken from 800 billion miles away. 800 million miles away, sorry. Got carried away there. So these are some of the pictures of people posing with Saturn either the real thing or with pictures. And the next one shows what I think is Pakistan. I can never remember all these. And the next one after that definitely is Pakistan. I'm pretty sure that's in Karachi. And the next one shows a lone sidewalk astronomer in Long Beach, Southern California. There's a single guy showing Saturn to the public, and then the next one shows a little bit bigger crowd in Argentina. The next one shows the Curia group we had up at Mount Wilson that year, and during that time, and we happened to have the 60-inch telescope. This is an educational program. I don't know if I actually describe what it is, but we had, I think there were 6 students, and one of them was late, so it wasn't in the picture, but we were looking at Saturn through the 60-inch. The next one shows a very excited student at Caltech pointing where Saturn is. And the next one shows a couple of guys posing with Saturn itself holding it up. So the next one, I can't remember which side of the border it's on, but it's clearly in the Sonora Desert. Clyde would know more about this than I do because he's been around saguaros quite a bit more than I am. The next one is definitely in Mexico, Guadalajara. Saturn is in the sky where they are pointing. I cajoled most of the staff at Celestron in the next one to go outside and take a picture with their little observatory there named after the former CEO. The next one, somebody wrapped in the flag of Turkey looking out at Saturn from a rooftop. And next, Saturn is about to get swallowed by a Tyrannosaurus Rex. That has to be California because who else would do this? And besides, look at the trees. So I think it is, not sure. Next one we have New Zealand. Following that, again in Iran. This next one is obviously North Africa, in the Sahara. I forget, I think that might be Morocco, but it could be Tunisia as well. The next one is interesting. I happened to see the solar astronomer Jay Pasakoff, who Claude certainly knows, at a meeting in New York, and he was going from New York to his cousin's wedding in London. And I said, oh, that's interesting, because he told me when the wedding was, and it's the same day as this. Well, it turns out the wedding was during the time that Cassini would be imaging Saturn. So I said, well, they're having their wedding picture taken from Saturn. And so he took this picture along, and here they are at their wedding posing to Saturn. The next one is, I don't know, it's kids somewhere. I can't remember. I think it's Central America, but I'm not sure. The next one, I know that one is Ghana, and the next after that shows Ghana. They have a planetarium there. It's the only one I know of in Sub-Saharan Africa where they do great outreach stuff. And the next one shows a school in Los Angeles, sort of doing the outline of Saturn there. And the next shows that all these pictures were taken and used in a montage to look like Saturn, and the Cassini spacecraft was put in there. And I have to say that down below the Earth there that you see, it looks blue, which seems appropriate, but that's our logo, Astronomers Without Borders. And the next shows the participation certificate that everybody gets when they take part in something like this. Well, this is a very, very important thing around the world. People will write and say, where's my certificate? It's expected. Not as big here, but I think a lot of people here do like it as well. So the next picture does show the final picture. It's hard to see what's what in here, but the one after that shows the labels, and so you have the Earth and Moon down in the lower right, and lots of different satellites. So let's zoom in on the next one to Earth and the Moon, and if you look closely you can see it's not quite round, but if you go to the next one you can see it is Earth and the Moon both imaged there. So that's some of the kinds of things that we do with astronomy, connect people together. And the last slide, the title slide here, is just to show that it's great to follow the old adage to think locally, think globally and act locally, because that's what you can do. Think about the whole planet and act where you can. Well, we turn that around. We think locally, here's what we're doing here, and then we act globally. How can we bring this to other people? How can we connect everybody? So it's really kind of the opposite. The internet makes it possible for us, but it really has a lot of potential. And as I said, next year we are in the middle of having our website completely redone, all custom for us, so we'll avoid many of the problems. Be able to do all the things we want to do all along, and the opportunities are practically limitless. So thank you. That's that. I'm glad to take any questions if you have any.
Well, I hope that that has certainly fired people up. Our organization here in Big Bear has actually been getting quite active lately. We have been doing a monthly sidewalk astronomy up here in Big Bear, which we've rebranded Urban Assault Astronomy. Mm-hmm. And just this last weekend, we did our first daylight solar sidewalk astronomy, our Sunday. So we are branching out, and I'm hoping that this has fired people up to get yet more involved. Any questions or comments?
Mike, just one question for you. We've recorded this on video. Can we put it on the club website?
Yeah, I don't see why not. It's fine. You know, many of these pictures, of course, most of these pictures were taken by other people, but nobody's going to be able to see them from the website in a video. So that's fine. I'll be glad to have it there.
Very good. Thank you.
Question about this getting together, having a sister club somewhere. Mm-hmm. How does one do that, and what would any of the Big Bear folks be interested in that?
Yeah, well, I hope Big Bear folks are interested in that. That would be great. The way to do it is simple. We have an application form in there on our website for that local pairing program. There's a person who manages that program, and he receives that, and it's really just gathering the initial information. I mean, you could write to him and he could send you the questions. So there are just questions about, you know, what the club's interests are, and there are things like time zones. When is the best time for you to meet? Because I just have been talking with somebody in Pakistan, and he's 12.5 hours ahead of me, you know, so it has to be very late in one place and very early in the other, and whichever works out. But it's not that bad. So there are a number of questions. So if you can fill out that form, that's really the best way. Or I can just give you the address to the person who handles that as well. So it's easy to find on the website because it comes up. We have a slides that go across, and I think it's the second one is the global pairing program.
So what would be an example of what you do when you're paired with another club?
Well, to a certain extent, we leave that up to the clubs. We had sort of laid out a whole program. Here's what you're going to do, and you're going to tutor them, and you can meet regularly and everything. And you know, nobody has time to necessarily follow somebody else's timetable. So the initial thing is really to Skype with the other club and get to know them and find out what they're interested in and share some of the things that you do with each other. And we can provide guidance on that as far as topics, because I've been in an awful lot of places, and you know, some interesting things that would be conversation starters. But that's pretty simple. What we would hope after that would be that there would be a certain amount of exchange of information with guys like you who may be experienced amateur astronomers, sort of helping them out in terms of where to go for resources, to learn more about astronomy, or here's what we find really works for outreach, or you know, helping them understand the telescopes, or maybe to choose a telescope if they have the ability to get one. And then, of course, there are things like the the Las Cumbres telescopes available, but that's so far down the line in a relationship like this that we wouldn't really talk about that. So it's sort of a certain amount of getting to know people through astronomy, but it works extraordinarily well. And I've met a lot of people around the world, in our country and in other countries, through this.
Mike, one more question for you. There was a lot of focus on Africa, North Africa, Central Europe. have you worked or thought about much about Asia?
Yeah, we work a lot with Asia. The reason that I have the pictures that seem to focus in certain places is because that's who sent the pictures.
Yep.
So, and of course, well, Western Asia, Iran I go to a lot. I have a ton of pictures there. But now China is not as involved as we would like. There are some, but a lot in Southeast Asia. And South Asia, of course, you saw India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Nepal, and let's see. You know, there's a little bit here and there. I'm trying to think of other ones that are really big. Are you interested in you know, asking about certain countries in particular?
Yeah, you saw a dearth of Japan, South Korea, that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's interesting. Japan. My impression, knowing people from Japan and talking to others, is that they don't look outside of their own country very much. And so they don't get involved so much. This used to be the case in China until they realized that their isolating themselves was hurting them to a certain extent. It's really educators who, you know, they have great students who can take tests because they know everything, but they can't do anything on their own. It's a cultural difference, you know, so they've changed that. They've really opened up. I had to go to several meetings in Beijing, which is the smoggiest place in the world, because they just have them all there. Japan, there has just not been a lot of interest in doing things internationally. Now, South Korea, that's a good question. I never really even thought about it. I know very few people in South Korea. I don't know if it's the same thing. And I don't remember who else you mentioned. But there is, like you saw, Vietnam, Philippines is very active, Indonesia.
Australia, New Zealand?
Sorry?
Australia, New Zealand?
Yeah, Australia and New Zealand are both very active, and there are people taking part there. And so that's, yeah, those are definitely there.
And do you find resistance or reluctance for that Asian community?
Well, Japan is the only one where I can say I think there's a certain amount of reluctance to taking part in things that are outside of the country, which is cultural, and I don't understand it, but that's the way it is. Other countries, I really don't know. You know, we've sort of focused on the countries that have them, and most countries the people are very interested in reaching out to others, maybe in their own neighborhood or maybe halfway around the world. They're all interested in America. I mean, they all want to, aside from be connected with and know people here, you know, to come here. So we all know that. And that's the case everywhere. And no matter what you hear about any country, that's the case. You know, everybody in Iran wants to come here, and an awful lot of them, as you know, if you're in Southern California, have. But I guess I don't have an answer for that for countries where we haven't really connected, and it may just be a matter of awareness.
And would you find English to be the common language there?
English is always the common language. This is interesting that countries that are open to international, they are teaching English in the schools. Now, it's usually the second language in schools. Some countries, like Pakistan, English is one of the first languages, Urdu and English, so they all speak English. The educated people in India. In other countries, North Africa and many places, the educated people speak English. The youngsters are all learning English. I go to places where I don't know a single word in their language. They apologize to me for not knowing more English. Wow. And I say, well, this is backwards. I should know your language, not the other way around. But it really has become the international language. Here's an interesting thing. The first time I went to China, this is something you have to watch out for. If you go to China and you need to get a taxi, don't count on somebody knowing English. They don't. Nobody knows English. There are no English signs. And you know, we couldn't get a cab, and that's happened to so many other people. But the university students, they all know English, but it hasn't spread out yet. So we do everything in English. We've had plans to make things in other languages. I think becoming increasingly less important. there's always somebody that speaks English if you pair up with another club. Not everybody, but many.
Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, I should probably thank Mike again. I promised I'd keep this to an hour and not take too much of your evening.
Well, it's hard for me to stop talking.
It was very interesting.
We really appreciate it. And also, for some of your programs going on, don't forget if you're doing something with solar, contact us here at BBSO as well.
You know, Claude, that's a good point because we want to have a much bigger Sunday this time, and I have always wanted to contact you and others at solar observatories and get people involved. What it requires is somebody who's going to run that program, who's going to take the lead and coordinate people at different observatories and everything else.
Yeah, up until yesterday, I thought that we were starting to catch up on things and might be in a better place to do that sort of thing until I took John Varsic out of service for a little bit, so we'll just have to see how that goes and see if we can catch back up again.
Yeah, well, that would be great. And if you know anybody who is really a solar outreach guy primarily, who'd like to help to get the programs up there, and we do have a coordinator for Global Astronomy Month, but she can't do everything. So if you think of anybody, it doesn't have to be one person, we can have a few people. But, you know, somebody's got to lead things for them, we'll right.
Well, I'm not going to volunteer anybody, but I will say Teresa just got herself a Daystar filter, so.
I see, okay, well, I know where she lives. And,
That's on record
and
here.
you know, John hasn't got much to do now, he's going to be sitting around now that you've taken him out of commission there.
Hopefully he will be up and about in a week or so, and
See.
we need him back desperately.
Well, Teresa would be fantastic, so let's hope she gets really enthused about it, enough to want to, it's a lot of fun because you work with people around the world, it's crazy.
Well, this will also convince her that she shouldn't leave me alone for a couple of days and then go out and visit her dad, or she gets volunteered.
Yeah, so I think I think everybody around you seems to be learning some kind of a lesson.
Okay. Mike, thank you so much. And one more time.
Thank you.
Anytime you want to get away from the heat down there, you know you're more than welcome up here on the mountain.
Well, that would be great. Maybe come July, that would be terrific.
Take care.
Absolutely.
All right, thanks, kid. Bye-bye.